This one's probably going to be a relatively quick segment, but I want to touch on this deck at least because it was probably the most powerful deck in the format, all things considered. Like it's gotten a little bit less popular recently, but overall, it was still, I think, the most successful deck of this format, which was Mitsurugi Yami. And when we're talking about Mitsurugi Yami, I guess I want to talk about Mitsurugi and Yami hybrids in general. We're going to talk about Yami in a second separately, but so let's start with the Mitsurugi part. This deck is gone. This deck is gone because the fundamental that it was built on is not there anymore, right? The idea of being able to use the Yami cards as starters for Mitsurugi just does not exist anymore, as far as I'm aware of. Of course, there's a chance that someone finds other bridges to Habakiri, but for now, the bridge that was so good in this deck is gone now. But that's not the only thing that makes me say that, because technically you could still play two archetypes together, even if they can't search each other, just because they synergize. You could still do that. You know, people are doing that with some decks. Like, for example, I think Orcust Mitsurugi, they couldn't bridge into Mitsu anymore after they banned King of the Fair Limbs, but some people still played it after just because the decks had synergy. Like, you didn't care that you just had two engines in your deck, and if you draw both engines, then you have more pushes. Easy as that, right? K9 Mitsu is the same thing, actually. Like, K9 Mitsu on paper has a bridge to search the Mitsu cards with K9, but in practice, a lot of them didn't even use that. Right? It just wasn't played. The Ashland combo. They didn't need it because it's just like, okay, I have K9 cards, I have Mitsu cards. They don't have anti-synergies. They work well together. There's no locks. So I can just, you know, normal summon Noroi, push with that, and then activate Habakiri later, and that works. Still, I think for this deck, there's just fundamentally, there's two problems, or three. There's three problems. Problem number one, no, there's four problems. Problem number one, the bridge is not working anymore. So Yami does not access Mitsurugi, as far as I know, at this point in time. Problem number two, your end board gets significantly weaker because you don't have Herald anymore. And that is a huge problem because besides Great Purification, that was your only Omni negate. So now you have still one Omni that you can search in the trap card. But if you ever start with just the Yamis, you cannot go into Mitsu anymore, and you also don't get Herald. So basically, when you just open Yamis in this deck now, you're doing jack shit, basically, because you don't get any real end board pieces from that. Problem number three, you lose starters because Habakiri was also limited. So not only is it harder to search Habakiri now, it's also harder to draw Habakiri. And that definitely decreases the quality of your hands because even though it was possible to bridge from these engines into each other, the most broken thing about this deck was when they drew a Yami monster and Habakiri together, right? Like when they opened both engines and they didn't even have to worry about resolving the bridge, that was the most broken shit, because you would maybe throw your interruptions at the Cupsy or at the Marshmallow, try to stop them from doing Yami combos, and then they just go like, okay, now I activate Habakiri. And that's going to be harder to do now because you lose two starters. And it's one of the best starters in the deck because this one still does Yami combo as well, right? Via Zombie Vampire, which unfortunately they did not ban, but yeah. So the Yamis are now much weaker starters, and your best starter is now at 1. So this deck loses a lot of consistency and firepower. And problem number 4 is that one Snatchy also hurts the deck, right? Like not being able to play the Yami engine to the full potential. Basically, the Yami cards are just really low quality in this deck now, right? If you compare what the Yami cards did before the ban list to after the ban list for this deck, it's night and day, right? No more Mitsu starter, no more Omni negate on the end board, no more double Snatchy for even making your plays work properly. So the Yami cards are just like really, really low quality now in this deck. And that's good, because this deck was probably one of the most problematic decks in the game by far. So it's really good that this deck is now pretty heavily hit on this list. So yeah, the more interesting thing to look at, in my opinion, after they've now slaughtered the Yami hybrid in Mitsurugi, is how does Yami recover from this, if it even recovers? I'm gonna be honest with you. This deck is probably the deck that suffered the most from this ban list, besides Mitsurugi Yami, and that's pure Yami. This is just Maxi's list from the German Open that he also topped YCS Bologna with. I honestly think to me, it's pretty clear that this deck is probably dead. I think there are ways to play Yami still, but they involve other engines, because quite frankly, I think pure Yami, I mean, it's just lacking too much, right? There's two important things that Yami just cannot do anymore, right? You don't have a good end board anymore because Herald of the Arclight is gone, which you could maybe argue there's a chance Yami can make up for this with this card. Hold up. Burst Protocol, this card. This card could maybe save Yami in that regard as an end board piece, because you can make this. So this is Zeren the Chainbound Dragon, which is a card in Burst Protocol. I think it's meant to be cool tune support, but it's also pretty good for Yami. It's a level 7 synchro that requires a tuner and a synchro monster. If this card would be used as synchro material, you can treat it as a non-tuner. When a card or effect is activated in response to a card or effect, you can either negate the effect or you can negate the effect that was responded to. So this is you could cheat this out in Yami by going like, you have like some Metal Marcher, Samsara Sorocat, or Cupid pitch lines to summon this as a level 7. And then you can still play around like Nibiru, for example, because the way this works, if your opponent goes Chainlink 1 Nibiru, you cannot activate this yet because it only works when something is chained. So what you would do is, like, your opponent activates Nib, you chain Snatchy, or you chain Link Karibo in the graveyard, or you chain a Synchro to tag out, and then as Chainlink 3, you can negate the Nibiru. Which completely falls apart if your opponent has Nibiru plus another thing that they can activate, because then they can go Nib, you chain, they chain, and then it's too late to negate the Nibiru for this. So this card is much weaker than Herald of the Arclight, but technically, this could work in Yami. But I think that's where the second problem for the deck comes in, and that's Snatchy at 1. Snatchy at 1 is brutal for pure Yami. Playing Snatchy at 2, we built this list for YCS Bologna together, and putting Snatchy to 2 was already a huge commitment. It was already really hard to play the deck with 2 Snatchies. Snatchy at 1 is really, really tough, because Snatchy is like 90% of the time, it needs to be the first Link 1 you make, because you need your first Link 1 to do something, right? You need the first Link 1 to, like, get you the field spell. But if you summon Snatchy as your first Link 1, it is almost impossible to have a Snatchy on the end board. You basically have to use Surprise to revive the Snatchy now, or you have to end on a Synchro that tags out into the Snatchy. But going first, it could even be manageable with one Snatchy. Going second is so bad. Like, and this is the problem, right? When you go second and you summon a Yami, usually you should go into Snatchy, because Snatchy baits interruption, Snatchy threatens to quick synchro when you put up another level 1. So, like, your first play should always be make Snatchy. And then when your opponent has removal now, they just remove the Snatchy from the field. Which means that even if you have an extender, even if you have ways to play after, you can't go into another Snatchy, which makes your stuff so much weaker to more removal. Like, you just cannot make another... You just can't make a Link 1 that quick synchros anymore. Like, you make your Link Karibo or your Gravity Controller or your Almirage or whatever, and your opponent just removes it, and you can't quick synchro. It doesn't work. So it's really tough with one Snatchy. I think it's hard out here. So Pure Yummy, unfortunately, I don't really see it working with one Snatchy. I think that's just too difficult. You have to play triple surprise. Maybe, but that's such a huge commitment just to deal with that. That's the thing, right? When I say the deck is dead, I don't mean like it's not literally dead, right? It's technically possible to play a Yummy deck with one Snatchy. When I say dead, I mean like there is no competitive reason to play Snatchy, like or to play Yummy. You can play the deck, but you just won't be winning enough to justify playing it. Basically, is what I'm trying to say, right? Like you can try to work around this. You can try to put in more surprises so you can bring the Snatchy back when it's gone, and so on and so forth. Like, yeah, that could work, and you're gonna be winning some games with that. But in the grand scheme of things, it's just going to turn it into a rogue deck, basically, right? It's going from a meta strategy to a rogue deck, which is what I mean when I say it's dead. Like it's not like dead if they as if they banned Snatchy, right? If they banned Snatchy, you just couldn't play Yummy anymore. But like it's basically not competitively viable, I think. That being said, I think Yummy, and that's unfortunately this is bad news, but I think Yummy still has some things going for it because it's so splashable, right? Like I can definitely see a world, and that's my least favorite way for things to go, but I can see a world where people find decks that just bridge into Yummy very seamlessly, and that could still be okay, right? I think there's other decks that maybe can work where Yummy is just like a small package, and you just go and at some point you make a link 1 and you have a level 1 in your deck, and they can just go into Cupsy Yummy way, and then you get Cupsy and Marshmallow or whatever, and that just like it just makes your end board a little bit stronger, right? Like I've seen people mess around with Yummy Tri-Brigade, because Tri-Brigade is getting support in Burst Protocol. That stuff could work, because that also simultaneously like kind of covers the problem of Herald of the Arclight making your end board bad in pure Yummy. Like without Herald, you just don't have an end board in Yummy. So if you play like a hybrid version, I could still see it. And I think the closest thing, if you really enjoy the playstyle of pure Yummy, I think the closest thing to that can still be viable in some ways is Sulfur Cord Yummy. I think this is basically all the things I just said. I think this kind of works still, because yeah, you lose the Herald of the Arclight, but this deck still has ways to play around Nibiru because it has its own Omni Negate in Grand Sulfur Cord Kulia. It has more pushes. It can actually play without Snatchy in the beginning, because the Sulfur Cord combos, they bridge into Cupsy Yummy way by going Linkaribo, and Linkaribo is pretty good as the first Link 1 in this deck, because it gives you multiple accesses to a Link 1 later on in the turn without using up a lot of extra deck space, because it can come back from the graveyard. So I think Sulfur Cord Yummy is... I could still see it working. I'm not sure if it's going to be a top tier deck, but I could still see this version of the deck. I can still see that one working. And that's basically what you're going to try to look for with Yummy. I think there's going to be ways to play Yummy. Whether they're going to be meta relevant or not, it remains to be seen. Chances are small-ish, I would say. But I think if you want to make Yummy work, then Yummy Sulfur Cord, Yummy Tri-Brigade, those are some places to start, and I think those could work realistically.